Alright, what's up you guys? This is Devin, and yes, we have started off season 5 of Project Sax. And I know you guys looking at me like, wait, where did the rest of season 4 go? Well, since I hadn't started a season since the year started, I wanted to start a new season, you know, and get stuff started off brand new. Now today we're going to be talking about practice. Now, like you heard in the last episode, Caddy Rodriguez, the saxophone player for Beyonce, at least for the Super Bowl, had contacted me. Well, I had contacted her and, you know, talked to her at least in one Facebook message, and that's contact to me. So yeah, really, Caddy Rodriguez, and if I'm pronouncing that right, Caddy Rodriguez got in contact with me after I had Facebooked her, and she got back in contact with immediate response and told me practice every day. Now, that's why I decided to make this video, because a lot of people get a misconception about practice, and I want to help you guys out. I'm not saying Caddy Rodriguez is wrong. In fact, she inspired me to make this episode. So, this is Mercury, like everybody knows. This is Mercury, and this is my soprano saxophone. But I won't be playing much because, you know, in a dormitory, you don't really have that many, you know, nuances, well, not nuances, but privileges to play, excuse me. And you really have to stop playing after a certain time, no matter how loud you play. Now, I can practice my tone control and my dynamic control by playing really softly. Like I can do all that kind of weird stuff, or I can, you know, play a ballad. Or whatever I'm playing, but I can't really get away with a lot of full practice types of things. And that's what I want to talk about today. Practicing hard. Now, a lot of people ask me, you know, or how long do you practice a day? I gotta be honest with you guys. Sometimes I love a lot of things that I do. I do photography, I do videography, and I do a lot of things. So I might spend my saxophone practice time doing other things, but I always think about practicing my saxophone. And what I mean by that is I practice my saxophone without my saxophone being in my hands. It gets so addictive to me. Any music that I'm listening to will have a saxophone playing in it, and if a saxophone's not playing in it, I'm actually fingering a possible solo. I've gotten to the point where I can, you know, kind of hear, well, as a matter of fact, not kinda, really hear the actual notes that come to my fingers, you know, or the finger in the note, I can actually hear the note being played in my head. So when a key signature comes up in a song that I recognize, I'm like, oh, well, that's the key of this. Now, granted, I'm not always perfect, and I don't have, you know, I'm not a perfect robot. I get it wrong sometimes, you know, and I'm like, but that's when I go back. That's what makes me eager to go back and practice my saxophone, whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's 20 minutes, whether it's 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. So it's a process for correction for me. This is what I do. You know, when a song comes on the radio, I start to finger it, and my friends know that if they're in the car with me, they're gonna see me actually fingering the notes on the saxophone while I'm, you know, turning my steering wheel or doing some weird stuff, or sitting at a light, and, you know, and I'm always running through melodies in my head, possible melodies that I could possibly solo over. You can ask my friend Ellis. My friend Ellis knows me. I'm always thinking of possible ways to embellish the melody, to create something new. I'm always thinking about that, and then I think of what would a technique break be like if I were to put this in a technique break. So I find various ways to practice even without having my saxophone. Now, we're gonna have to bear with it. In the background we have some, you know, some students, but anyway, you might hear some noise in the background, but I'm gonna try to speak louder. But what I mean when I say it comes to practice is, yes, you have to practice every day, but I'm always constantly thinking about it. There's a difference between practicing and not having your mind into practicing, and actually thinking about practicing while you're practicing. Now, when you have your mind set on practicing, there's a whole different amount of things you can get done. Like, for instance, when you're not thinking about practicing, you're like, oh, my teacher told me to practice. My teacher told me I needed to play the concert of B-flat scale. And I gotta practice it forever, and I gotta practice it forever, and this many times, and I got my parents sign off of it on my rhythm sheet music, and I got my method books, they have to be signed off, and all this other stuff. It's so bad. If you dread practice, your practice will be dreadful. But there's levels of practice. There's a lot you can get done in that time frame that you're doing. You also have to have a goal in mind when you're practicing. So when you're practicing, have a goal in mind. Say for instance, I want to be able to play this song, this complicated song, or have a goal in mind. And actually, some of the best musicians I know have an agenda of what they want to do when they practice. It's not just doing what your teacher says. It's not just doing what your mom and dad said. You gotta actually have some passion and drive behind this, and I want to do it if you want to be a worthwhile musician. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I'm the best musician in the world, but I'm trying to offer the knowledge that I have to you guys. So with that being said, the next level of practice will be, I guess, an intermediate type. I'm just going to split up into 3 groups. The people who just do things because people tell them to, that kind of practice. And then we have the intermediate level of practice, where this is where I kind of fall in the category. I have to be honest with you guys. Now, I fall in this category because the way I define an intermediate musician is, when it comes to practice, is you practice a fair amount. You practice a pretty decent amount. Like, if people were to come up to you, they'd be like, "Oh, you practice a lot." Because in this intermediate level of practice, you're actually trying to come up with a goal, get things done, but you may or may not get everything that you want done, but you're interested and you get sidetracked and you want to play something else. You're also always playing and you're always practicing. So you're getting better, but not in a full force direction. And that can be, good and bad sometimes. And then you may be good at sight reading, but you may not be good at ear training. And then you might be good at ear training, but you might not be good at sight reading because you don't get everything done because you're an intermediate practicer. And that doesn't mean you're a bad practicer. I mean, it's good. I mean, you could be something great on an instrument, but if you want to do what your heart desires to come out of this instrument, I suggest you go to the last level of practice. In my opinion, this is the hardcore practice. These are the people who are not afraid to make a wrong note in practice. Like, for instance, and well, let me change this. I think I'm between intermediate and hardcore. Why? Because sometimes when I'm practicing or playing or doing whatever, on a saxophone, I will sit there and do it for hours. Like, say there's a lick in a song or rhythm exercise, and I'm sitting here like, and I'm sitting there doing it forever, like I don't even think about the time, and next thing you know, it's 3 hours and I'm working on that one phrase, trying to make it as good as I can. But then I get sidetracked and I branch off, and it's not necessarily a sidetrack, it's a positive thing. It's an inspiration that I get, and I'm like, okay, well, and then I'll start sidetracking, and this comes from mistakes. This is from me actually making loud mistakes and me doing it over and over again. Don't get me started on altissimo training. I'm not going to do that for you today. But when you're actually practicing and you're trying to go up into that higher register and do those types of things, you can't be scared. That's one thing that a lot of intermediate practitioners and lower level practitioners get scared of. They get scared and they're like, well, what if I make a bad noise? Or what if people don't like me that's in my household? Or what if the people around me don't like me? Well, you can't you can't do this with that type of fear. There's a type of fear that comes along with this, because this is, you're kind of invading somebody's senses. You own the sound waves, essentially. It's like you can cut through a lot of, things that are going on around you, and sometimes people don't want to hear that if you're doing it wrong. And if you're doing altissimo, people definitely don't want to hear you training that. You are, think about Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker, he wasn't a big altissimo buff that I know of, but he did a lot of horn stuff. And I had imagined he was definitely a hardcore practicer, so I had imagined that he had a lot of people who were angry at him, neighbors, people, you know, who didn't want to hear what he was practicing on. And they don't want to hear that repetitive. They know you're trying to get something down, but they don't want to hear it. It's kind of like you're forcing them to hear something that they want to hear. And a lot of people get scared of that. But you have to break through that. You need to find yourself a place where it's safe around musicians. That's why I like practicing in the band room, because even if I screw up or screech or brick or anything like that, they know I'm practicing, and I'll try my best to not do that in the performance. So, you know, but practice, you know, practice will help prevent you messing up in performance. And what you want is that will to be able to do what you need to do to get it done. For instance, if you were doing gun training, you can't be scared to shoot a gun. You can't. And if you're saxophone playing, you can't be scared to push this thing to the limit and see what you can get out of it. So that's a really big thing for me. But you guys keep practicing. This is Devin, and I'm signing off again. But Caddy Rodriguez really pushed me to make this video. I have to be honest. I practice as much as I can. I'm not going to say, okay, I practice every day 3 times a day, because sometimes 3 hours a day, because it doesn't work out like that with me. Now, give you a grasp of how my mind thinks about practice at this point. At this point, I think about practice as, okay, maybe one day I want to be able to get on a schedule where I practice every day. But for now, I'm going to make sure I'm, you know, good on my schoolwork and try my best to practice when I can. But when I was in band practice, I used to practice every day for long amounts of time, and now I'm out of band practice. So, you know, it pays off, but I want to be able to manage my time and do a little bit of other things to compensate for that time, because a lot of that time I was spending doing marching band stuff. So, not to talk you guys' head off, but this is Devin from Project Sax, and practice itself is a really big thing for me when it comes to saxophones. And sometimes I can't wait to practice, and sometimes practice is not the top thing on my mind, but I know I will put forth my effort. For example, if I am 2 days, if I haven't practiced, there's something wrong, or I'm just, you know, building up that tension to really give it a good practice day the next day. You know, I never go more than 2 or 3 days without practicing. I never do. That's never crossed my mind. And you know, I'm always going to be I always perform every week, so it's a big thing for me. But sorry to talk you guys' head off. My name is Devin from Project Sax. I'm wishing you good sound, and have a good day.